Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, disturbing books. I want to talk to you about my ongoing project to read the most disturbing books ever written. So people may have seen the video I put up a little while ago announcing the start of this project. I'm 6 books into it now, so I thought it was worth doing an update on it. But for people who aren't familiar with it, the concept is, so a while ago I put up a review of this book, noticed by Heather Lewis, in which I said it was the most disturbing book I've ever read. That video got a lot of views and a lot of people have left comments on the most disturbing book they've ever read. And I'm working through the list of those recommended or suggested books. So I haven't taken absolutely every book out of the comments because there were absolutely loads of them, but I've taken ones where more than one person suggested them. And as I say, I've read 6 of them now. So I wanted to talk very briefly about those 6. I have done review videos for all of them, apart from one which will be going up this week. So I wanted to talk about those and also talk about the other books I've still got left to read. So when I did my announcement video for the project, I had a list. That list has grown since then. So I'll do a recap of the books I already said I was going to read, and then we'll also talk about the ones that have been added to the list. Now, one of the other things I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this list. So on my blog, which is criminolly.com, I will put up a post with a list of all the books in the Disturbing Books project, whether I've read them or not, and when I think I'm likely to be getting to them for the ones I've got planned in, so that if people want to read along with me, they can do. And if you want to do that and you're not already a member of my Discord server, it's free to join. You just need to download the app to your phone. And we can talk about, we can do some buddy reads and talk about the books there. Right, so let me start by talking about the 6 books I have read so far then. So they are these. So let me go through them. And I may not do them in the right order, but we shall see. Or not in order of reading them anyway. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Cows by Mathhew Stokoe. So as I said, I've done a review of this, as with the other books. I did not find this book very disturbing. So it is absolutely disgusting, and it is probably the book that has made me closest to, has brought me closest to physically vomiting. But I didn't find it that disturbing. So it's about a young guy who works in a slaughterhouse, who has a very strange relationship with his mother, who is very abusive to him. It goes to all different sorts of places. I just found it just felt like all it wanted to do was shock, and it didn't get under my skin in the way that a truly disturbing book can, but certainly not in the way that Notice did. I've also read Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. So again, this was a bit disturbing, but I didn't find it massively disturbing. So this is quite a well-known book, released recently and got a lot of buzz, about a dystopian future where human beings are farmed for their meat. So there's been a virus which has made all animal meat poisonous to humans, and so the powers that be have decided to start rearing and farming humans for their meat. So it's definitely a very disturbing concept. But as I said in my review, I found that there was a kind of distance put between the reader and the events of the book that stopped me from ever really engaging with the suffering of the people who are being farmed. And that for me is what makes a really disturbing book. And that is what was so disturbing for me about Notice was I felt completely brought into the world of the woman at the centre of this book, and this is a woman who goes through kind of horrific abuse, which she is almost in some ways seeking, and that's what is most horrific about this book, is that it feels like she feels compelled to put herself into these situations where horrific things are going to happen to her. So both the physical descriptions of what happened to her are horrific, but also her helplessness in the face of her own kind of damaged psychology that pushes her to do these dangerous things. Okay, next then, let's talk about Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Brite. So this is a horror novel from the 90s about two serial killers, one of whom is also a necrophiliac and one of whom is also a cannibal, who meet up and kind of form a strange relationship. I mean, this is an excellent book, and it's certainly very grim and upsetting at times in terms of some of the descriptions of violence and things like that in it. But it was only towards the end of the book, again, when a character I felt like I had built a relationship with is in danger, is in peril, is getting put into horrific situations, that I started to really find it disturbing. So an excellent book, but again, for me, not as disturbing as Notice. And one of the things I've been reflecting on as I've gone through this project is that probably, everybody finds different things disturbing. There is no disturbing is one of those concepts, one of those emotions that is quite intangible, and it's quite difficult to describe in some ways. But I also think it's something that's very subjective. So everybody will find different things disturbing, and someone who's found, some people may find cows horrifically disturbing, and certainly, people who suggest it in the comments seem to. But for me, it doesn't have that kind of personal connection that makes books, for me, really disturbing. So let's talk about the next three I've read then. So this is the one I've read most recently. So Story of the Eye by Georges Bataille. So a very strange transgressive novel from the early 20th century about a group of three young people who have increasingly bizarre and dangerous sex, basically. So a beautifully written book at times, and certainly by the end, the things they are doing are disturbing. But again, there's kind of a dreamlike quality to this book, quite deliberately, I think, that made me feel slightly distanced from the activity that's happening in the book, and therefore I didn't find it particularly disturbing. Final two then are both Kindle books. So the first is the 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade, a very famous work of, some people would label it as erotica, but I found it to be one of the least erotic things I've ever read. So a book about a group of entitled noblemen who basically imprison a large cast of people in a castle and subject them to 120 days of kind of depraved sex and abuse, effectively. So it reads like a laundry list of disgusting acts, many of which you would not even dream of happening in the real world. It is disturbing in that some of these things were things that de Sade did in his life, and there is a lot of description of sexual activity in this book, which is very outside the norm, very abusive, and it is disturbing as a result. But the book as a whole is also just quite boring, because he's just so wrapped up in his own obsessions, and it just goes on and on and on. And I certainly never felt anything like a personal connection with any of the characters. So again, not a book that I found disturbing necessarily. I certainly found it disgusting and repellent, but I did not find it that disturbing. And then the final one is a fairly new horror novel, and indeed one that wasn't on my original list to read, but it ended up being a book that I added to my longer list of disturbing books. And then there was a group read going on of it this month, so I thought I'd read it, and that is Gone to See the Riverman by Kristopher Triana. So this is a book with a fantastically disturbing concept, and it's a book that I think I'd built up in my mind as a book that really was going to be disturbing. So it's about a woman who is having a long distance relationship with a serial killer who's in prison, and he asks her to do him a favour, which involves her and her sister going to this remote location to retrieve something of his. So there's something about that central concept which I think is quite creepy. And the book, certainly delivers on that, and there are some very disturbing bits in the book. But for me, it was more of an engaging and very well written and very taut kind of horror thriller, rather than what I would call a really disturbing book. So I enjoyed it very much, but again, I wouldn't call it that disturbing. Okay, so let's move on then, and I'll just do a quick recap for people who haven't seen the other video of the books that were on my original list of disturbing books to read, which I haven't got to yet. So they are The Room by Hubert Selby Jr., The Pillowman by Martin McDonagh, The Melting by Lize Spit. Oops, my pile of books has just fallen off my desk. The End of Alice by A.M. Holmes. Birdman by Mo Hayder. And then a few Kindle ones as well. So The Summer I Died by Ryan C. Thomas. Pretty Girls by Karin Slaughter. Child of God by Cormac McCarthy, and Woom by Duncan Ralston. So all of these in the launch video I talk a bit more about why they've made it onto the list and why I want to read them. So in terms of things I've added since doing that video, so The Cement Garden by Ian McEwan, which is McEwan is a very well respected author. I've never read any of his novels. I've read one of his short stories. This is a book about incest, and interestingly, incest is a theme that has come up in a number of the books I've read so far, and I think it is something that we all find inherently disturbing. It's a natural taboo, isn't it? So yes, looking forward to reading this. It's supposed to be very good and only very short as well. And then on Kindle then I have Geek Love by Katherine Dunn, which again is a book I've wanted to read for a long time, which is a book about a family of circus freaks, which is supposed to be, I think when it came out, many people loved it as a book, and a lot of people I know and whose opinions I respect really rate it. It is supposed to be disturbing in terms of a lot of the events in the books and things like that. I think with a more modern eye, and I think it came out about 20 years ago, some people, or maybe even a bit more than that, maybe 30 years ago, some people have kind of questioned the representation of disability in the book. So we'll see what I make of that when I read it. Another one then, and this is a book I think hadn't been mentioned in the comments when I came up with my original list, but it's a book I'm certainly very aware of and is supposed to be, people who have read this book say it really is the most disgusting and disturbing book ever, and that is Hogg by Samuel R. Delany. So Samuel Delany is a science fiction writer, a black queer author who has done great stuff in terms of science fiction, and particularly expanding representation and things like that in science fiction. So recognised as one of the greats of American science fiction, but also wrote a couple of books which are very different from most of his work, and Hogg is one of them. So it's supposed to be a deeply disturbing book about a young boy who ends up with effectively, I think, a gang of people who are just going around raping and murdering people at will. So it is supposed to be absolutely horrific, and I still don't know whether or not I really want to read it or not, but we shall see. Another one then, which I've added to the list, is The Story of O by Pauline Réage. So the famous kind of transgressive French erotic novel. So it felt like a fitting one to add. People had mentioned it, but it felt like a fitting one to add to go alongside Story of the Eye and 120 Days of Sodom. Another one then, so a modern extreme horror book by an author I have read. So I've read one book by this author which I didn't like at all. That author is Jon Athan, and the book is The Groomer, which I believe is kind of a revenge novel, but supposed to be incredibly graphic and disturbing. So I don't have high hopes for that one in terms of either its ability to disturb me, or the fact that I'm going to like it, because I don't think I am, but we shall see. And then the final one is My Dark Vanessa by Catherine Elizabeth Russell, or Kate Elizabeth Russell. A book about an abusive relationship, I think, between a lecturer and a student. A book I've kind of thought about reading for a while. Again, it did come up more recently in the comments. So I thought I would add that one to the list as well. And it's a book I have on my Kindle already. So those are the books I've read so far for this project, and the books I'm still planning to read. If there's any more you think I should be adding, do feel free to add them in the comments on this video. In terms of this month, so this month, January, I'm intending to read Hogg and The Room. So if you fancy reading along on either of those, do feel free to jump onto my Discord and let me know, and we can, I'll set up a channel for those, and we can do a buddy read of them, or a group read. But yeah, I'm still not sure what I think about Hogg. I don't know. We'll see how I feel when I finish it. But that's the one that I think is most likely to topple Notice as my most disturbing read. We shall see. Time will tell. So, time for a random book from the shelves. This is a book I read a while ago, which was unexpectedly disturbing. I expected it to be exciting, but I didn't expect it to be as disturbing as it was. And that's The Killing Lessons by Saul Black, which is a kind of a serial killer thriller. But I found certainly the first half of it incredibly disturbing in terms of the actions of the serial killer, but almost unbearably suspenseful, which is a combination that is quite effective. So definitely one I would recommend if you haven't read it already. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about and what you thought about them. As I say, if you want to join me in future reads, let me know. I will put up a full list on my blog, and I'll leave a link to it in the description for the video, of all the books I'm going to be reading for this. What I will try and do is also put the list on there of disturbing books I've already read. So, I'm not rereading disturbing books I've read in the past. So things like, The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, Let's Go Play at the Adams by Mendel Johnson, The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks, Out by Natsura Carino. These are all books I've already read and do consider to be disturbing, but clearly not as disturbing as Notice. Anyway, let me know what you think of all of this in the comments. Let me know if you think I'm an idiot for deliberately trying to disturb myself. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.